Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Divorce Dad Diaries. And I'm your host, Stéphane Jutras. This is episode 20, Relapse. So, I'm sure you all probably asking yourself why the name of the episode and the relapse and what it's about. And first of all, I just want to tell you all that everything is good. There's no drug substance addiction or anything that I relapsed. But I kind of got the idea of making an episode on relapsing maybe a couple of weeks ago. You know, I was sitting here and thinking about obviously the podcast and topics that I could talk about and how lucky I was that, you know, it's going well and I'm able to talk about my stories and my journey to all of you. And I know some reached out for some advice and everything. And, you know, everything seems to be going very well. And actually, it is going well, so I can't complain. But one thing I wanted to maybe talk about is even though, you know, I talk about it and I tell my stories and I'm in a really good place right now, it's not always going well. There's times that it's going less well than before. And there's times that it's harder. And there's times that I don't know what to do. I mean, I might give the impression sometimes that I know everything and maybe I've been through it and basically I'm the expert at it and, you know, I'm out of it and everything is good. But the reality is, and I think most of you realize that, it's never like that. Divorce, it's something that changes your life and that will be with you the rest of your life. It will impact everything you do. I mean, it will impact your kids, it will impact your relationships, it will impact even work and even yourself, obviously, definitely yourself. You come out of divorce. At least I came out from the divorce, not the same person. I changed quite a lot and did a lot of introspection during that time. And I talk about that in another episode. But it's really something that changes your life, hopefully for the better. And I think for myself, it was definitely for the better. It was a tough time, but at the same time, if I look at who I became right now and my life and how everything is happening around me, definitely I'm grateful of that. And after all those years, I can say that it was worth it. But at the same time, it depends on people. And I've talked to people that had some regrets about it and that, you know, always think back. But on my side, I can't really see I had any regret. At least I wouldn't call it regret. Obviously, you wish that you maybe have done some things differently, but I wouldn't consider that as regret on what I've done. Definitely, I'm more happy now. So when I thought about it, about this episode and relapse was more about, even though everything's going well, often things are not going as well. And I know I had some little arguments with my son, and it made me think about that too, that sometimes just like a drug addiction, I guess, or alcohol addiction or any addiction, it goes well, but there's always a risk that it goes less good after a while and that you have to deal with some issues that were kind of hidden. And also, there's always a risk that you go back to kind of how you were before. So that's why I call my relapse. So I had some arguments and I realized that as much as, you know, I'm happy where I am, it will happen once in a while. And you have to know how to deal with it. And actually, I think it's a good thing. It kind of puts everything in perspective and also make you realize that it's something you have to work at every day. Like I said, it doesn't go away. You went through a divorce as part of your life, and sometimes it's a big slice of your life. I mean, I was married almost for 20 years, so definitely it's a big slice of my life, and that doesn't go away. So you kind of have to learn to live with it and to deal with it when it kind of shows its head back. So I think one thing to do when that happens and when you have times that are not going that well, or you see that you're kind of going backwards in different situation. I mean, I'm at a different place now because it's been a couple of years and everything is finalized, but when I think back about how it was when I was going through it, you know, sometimes you make 2 steps forward and you make 10 steps backwards. And that's sometimes very discouraging as well. And again, you think it's going well and you kind of moved on, but something triggers you and you kind of go back to the place you were before. So it's normal for relapse. And like I said, I think my trick, what I usually do is take some time and kind of back off a little bit and think about where I am now and the journey more than the actual thing that's just happening and how much effort I put into it and how grateful I am about that. And it kind of helps me going through it. It's not something easy. And like I said, I am happy that I can share all this with you all And I might look like everything is good on my side, and I'm like the happiest guy alive, and I have all those advice that I can give, and all positive things. But yeah, even me, sometimes it's not going as well as it should be, or as I would want it to be. So as I said, relapse are definitely normal. Nobody is safe, and nobody can say that they'll never relapse. I think it's part of the journey. That's one thing I learned. It's like I said, it's never fully done, and some things might trigger you. Like we talk about maybe an argument with my kids, but at the same time, it can be kids, can be feeling a bit depressed again, or back to some money trouble, or even a stress, like general stress with work, relationship, kids, or whatever. Just to give you an example of that kind of relapse that I've experienced, or the story I was talking about before, is, as I said, obviously a divorce impacted the kids and everyone, but all has been good. And I have to say, like, for a couple of years, it's been all good and not really any issue. I mean, kids seem to be happy, and school was going well. But lately, I guess I've been having a bit more argument with my son. And he's always been good at school and everything. But I guess the past year has been a bit different. And again, thinking back, also we have to be careful about associating that problem with your relationship, or with the divorce, or with anything else, because sometimes it's like outside factors as well. And thinking about it, obviously with the pandemic at this point doesn't help anybody. There's a lot of relationships that are put to the test, because now you're kind of living together pretty much 24/7 and working at home, and you can't go out at times and things like that. So it really puts a stress on the relationship. Same thing with friends. I mean, you don't see your friends as much, so you might get some distance in there. So the kids is no different. I mean, kids here are still going to school. For example, my son is going maybe a couple of days a week. So one day at school, one day at home. And the past year has been difficult, because last year, half of the school year has been canceled because of the pandemic. And when you get home, and he's okay to being home, he's kind of the kid that stays home and in his room and plays video games. So obviously for him, staying home is actually great. And so last year, with half the year canceled, that didn't really help on that front. So he got kind of comfortable. And now this year, kind of going back to school, I think it kind of went back a bit too fast. And I guess, the reality that school still goes on, even if it's online. Having homework again, studying and everything, and the motivation is not as much there. And especially when you're home and you're in your bedroom and in your environment, it's hard to get the motivation to do it. And I can actually vouch for that, because I've been working from home for the past probably 6 years or so. And I remember at the beginning, it's quite of a change, and you need to get some good discipline if you want to actually do some work and not be distracted by everything. You can be distracted at home. So I guess his motivation is pretty low, like probably a lot of the kids, and I guess brings a lot of arguments on that front. And again, having online school makes it sometimes a bit more difficult to get motivated. And even if you have homework, well, when you're in front of the teacher is one thing. When you're like to a Zoom or actually at home, it's also another thing. So what I'm taking this as an example, but that can actually apply to pretty much anything else. For example, my thing with that was really like a couple of tricks or things that I usually do that helps, is really to try to listen and figure out what the problem, because often you think, like I'll go there and let's say we got a bad mark in a test. Well, we kind of assume that he didn't study, or that, we kind of know why that happened. But often, at least from what I've seen, is there's more than just that. So I think the key thing is usually I'll try to listen and see what the problem is, and try to figure out and try to work with him. It's not always easy, because obviously, like I said, everybody gets a bit defensive and the motivation is not there. So it's hard sometimes to kind of bring them to do something and to actually sit down and do some of the work. I usually try to do that part and see what happens. One thing that's important too, and it might get frustrating because that might happen, more than one time. If it happens multiple times, you often have to be careful also what you tell your kid as well. Kind of not to bring the other parent, for example. Sometimes it might be difficult and stuff. And instead of dealing with it, you kind of say, okay, go deal with it with your mom. That's definitely not a good thing to do. Or even worse, saying that, oh, you're just like your mom and you sound like your mom, or you're just like this. That's one thing that's really, I think, we all agree to try to avoid. And obviously when you're mad or at the heat or argument, there's a lot of things that can come up. And you say things sometimes that you regret. But definitely, I think it's important to keep away from that and make sure it doesn't happen. Because usually, I mean, that will make things worse. And I think also one thing that usually happens is you realize that you start acting like you were acting maybe before. And that's why I was talking about the relapse, right? You get into those arguments and you realize that you kind of go back to how it was before and how we're acting. And instead of trying, and maybe it worked before, but most probably, like in my case, for example, if it didn't work before, it won't work more now. So it's really to kind of step back and try to find a solution about it. So when you relapse, when you have those relapses, I will call them, either, like I said, with kids, but anything else, can be even being depressed, being home by yourself. And especially now with the pandemic, at the same time might be hard. And you might have kind of regret and, I won't say regret, but, not being able to see your friends as much and doing activities and things like that. You might get a bit more depressed. So that's the thing, and kind of go back to rethinking this whole divorce and separation. And that's when you have, again, also have to sit down and think about really how far you've gone and where you are. And also the actual, maybe try to figure out what the real problem is. Like I said, sometimes it's not as easy as we think, or it's not just what we deal with at the moment. Often it's a lot more than that. That's one thing. And money trouble too. I mean, lately, even with the pandemic, some people are not as lucky as other people. I'm in a great spot here because I'm still working and everything is going well on that part. But at the same time, I kind of count my blessings because I'm working, but I have my own company and also I work in, I would say, kind of a retail. So this kind of went down, but at the same time, didn't impact my work. So I could have ended up being with no job tomorrow. And now having my own company, it might have been much more difficult because you don't have the support system here to help you out. It's not like, you were employed and then they lay you off and they give you a couple months, 6 months or whatever of severance pay. So that was a bit stressful, but luckily I've been lucky on that side. So like I said, sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and just thinking about all the good things that happened and to try to focus on them to go forward. And I guess every time you go backward, you have those relapse, I find on my side, I get a little bit stronger and I learn a few things more every time. So that's a good part of it. It's also an opportunity to learn and not take anything for granted as well, because things might change. And again, everything's going well and everybody's happy and you get in that mood, but it's kind of a good reminder not to take all this for granted and to also keep in mind that sometimes things don't go as well as it went, and sometimes there's ups and downs, and that's part of life, and that's really how you look at them. So hopefully after those little relapses that you get, you kind of get out of them and a bit smarter and wiser, I guess, somehow, and try to learn from them. Like I said, it's not easy because often it just doesn't happen one time. And again, I was comparing at the beginning of the episode about addiction, but it's a bit the same thing. You never know, right? You can be good for 6 months, a year, and all of a sudden everything falls down and you get back in that place after that. And yeah, it's just a matter of basically looking forward and trying to get up again and just go ahead and work at it and get out of those places. All this is a bit, I guess, easier said than done sometimes. And that's my view and my opinions and my experience over here. And that's a bit how I deal with it. I'll be curious to see how you guys do, like what happens, or how do you deal with those downs that happen in your life. I know a lot of my listeners are a different place. Some of them, you guys have younger kids, older kids, no kids, or divorce went well, or it was really bad, still in the middle of divorce. So all different situations, but I think that applies too, right? It will really be a straight line forward. It will always be like kind of a line going back and forth. Eventually, hopefully, you see that you're kind of succeeding a little bit more when it's going more forward and backwards. So, you might start with a couple of steps forward and 10 steps backward, but eventually you'll still have those steps backward, but at least you have a lot more forward. So I think that's important to kind of go to that point. So that's something that made me reflect, and I thought would be kind of nice to share, and also get some of your stories or opinion about it, because I'd like to know how you guys deal with all this when that happens, and if it happens still often, or you kind of a bit got out of it and it's less and less. So that's it for this week. And as I was saying before, if any of you ever feel like talking or get those relapse and need some help or someone to talk to or even email or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, there's a few people that did, and it's always my pleasure to chat and discuss with you all. So definitely don't hesitate to do it. And that's another episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have any comment, please feel free to reach me at thedivorcedaddiaries@gmail.com, and you can find me on Instagram as well. And I'm having a couple of discussions there as well. So if you join me there, we can even talk on that part. That's probably where it's most active. So it's the Divorce Dad Diaries over there. So you can reach me there, and also have my website, www.thedivorcedaddiaries.com. And if you go on there, you'll see pretty much all my past episode, all the links. Everything is basically in one place there. And even have some groups that I'd like to try to see if we can get them a bit more active. But don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything. So I hope you guys all have an amazing week, and it was really nice talking to you again, and I'll talk to you very soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.